Okay, so we've got now a warm quinoa salad with lots of fresh greens and herbs. This is a great, nice sort of light lunch dish, brunch, and there's so much nutrition in this one, it's amazing. So I'll turn pot onto the heat. We'll start off with our quinoa. I've soaked the quinoa already. Quinoa doesn't need to soak for too long. Strain that off. So we get it all in there. So I'm going to add just under 2 cups of water into the pot, just because the quinoa was soaking, and I've got 1 cup of quinoa. So quinoa is normally 2 to 1 water. Depending on how long you soak it for, it will have already soaked up a certain amount of water, so you just reduce it accordingly. So into the pot, a little cracked pepper, a little sea salt. Quinoa is fantastic grain. It's known as the mother grain. Probably it has some of the most nutrition compared to all the other grains, but in actual fact, technically quinoa is not a grain, it's actually a seed. It comes from a plant, so traditionally grown in South America, and the seed of the plant is what is actually eaten. So being a seed, it can also be sprouted and eaten raw. Quinoa doesn't take so long to sprout at all, it just needs to be soaked overnight, strained into a colander, and then a day later you'll have little tails on the end of the seeds. But it's a complete protein in itself. It's got iron, magnesium, some of the B vitamins. Fantastic, easy to cook. I find the easiest way to cook quinoa is to let it come up to the boil, turn it down so it comes just to a simmer, leave it simmering for about 10 minutes uncovered, and I cover it, turn it down further on a very low heat for another 10 minutes, and then turn it off the heat and leave it for 3 or 4 minutes before serving, and piece of cake done. So we'll just let it come to the boil first off. So in this dish we're going to be using a lot of greens, a lot of colour, a lot of flavour, a lot of nutrition. You can use anything you've got. I've got a bit of everything today. The garden's abundant at the moment, so we've got some silver beet, we've got spinach and kale, along with that bunch of fresh herbs. So you've got a lot of green goodness coming in there. So what I'm going to do first off is I'm just going to loosely tear everything into a bowl. I'll start off with a bit of my silver beet. Basically, being a warm salad, we'll put the quinoa on top of the greens at the end. And the warmth of the quinoa will just lightly soften the greens, wilting them down without really cooking them, so to speak, so much. If you can, it's always better to tear leaves, any sort of leaves, lettuce leaves, silver beet, spinach, anything with the hands. And when you tear a vegetable, it naturally rips along its veins, and in doing this, you retain more of the nutritional benefit that's stored in there. So, the quinoa has now come to the boil. So I'm just going to give that a gentle stir. We'll turn it down now so it's only simmering, and just check the time, marking about 10 minutes more or less, or to when you see these seeds just sort of starting to open up. So we'll give that 10 minutes now. The good thing about quinoa now is it's so readily available. It used to be a case of, it was quite sort of rare and exotic and hard to find. Now you see it in most supermarkets, definitely in health food stores. Only problem is it can be a little pricey, especially if you live in New Zealand, but it's something that's really worth it. And when you compare that it is a complete protein and you're getting so much nutrition out of it, it's completely worth it. So silver beet is in. Next we'll go for a little spinach. Same thing, we'll just tear these gently. And all your leafy green vegetables, they most more or less have similar nutritional value, but you've got loads of vitamin C in there. You've got iron, some of the B vitamins you've got, and probably most importantly, they're really, really high in antioxidants. They're marketing all these things these days as anti-cancer foods. But if you're eating a lot of this sort of stuff, you generally won't have to worry about cancer as it is. And lastly, we'll go for a bit of kale in there. Kale being a bit coarser than the others. It is a fantastic vegetable. Kale, I believe, is in the top 10 of the antioxidants in all food you can get. That's probably going to be enough in there, otherwise we're not going to get any quinoa in our bowl. So put those off to one side. It's coming along nicely there. So also we're going to be using some olives. Olives is one of those things that a lot of people don't really like, and to be honest, I never used to like them until I started eating them regularly. I was in Greece working for a year or so, Greece and Italy, and whenever you go anywhere there's always olives, so it's polite ways to eat them, and eventually I started acquiring a taste for them. But I think as a kid when I'd try them, you only have those terrible ones from the tin, the little black ones that are already pitted and sliced, and they're enough to put anyone off. But olives, if you don't like them, you should keep trying them occasionally if you can, and here and there you'll notice when you get a good quality one, and they're actually quite nice. My favourite tends to be Kalamata Greek olives. It's sort of slightly bigger than your little black olives, but they have a great flavour. They're not too bitter. But if you really don't like olives, you just leave them out of this dish, no problem. If you have an olive pitta, you can use the pitta. I tend to quite like that rustic torn olive look. As you may have already noticed, my cooking style is relatively rustic. Olives is another one of those things, if you're on the vegetarian diet, there's quite a lot of protein in them. As the world has us so worried about how much protein we're getting, it's often one of the first questions you get when you tell someone you're a vegetarian: where do you get your protein? It's interesting because the human body doesn't actually require that much protein, definitely nowhere near the amount the average person consumes. Okay, and we'll just give the quinoa a bit of a stir. So we're almost on 10 minutes there. I can see the grain seed is just starting to open up a little. So I'm going to pop the lid on there. I'm going to turn that right down to a low. In fact, I'm going to change onto a smaller element. Turn that right down. We'll leave that for about 10 minutes or so, then turn it off the heat, and then it'll be good to go. It is good to see more and more awareness coming of vegetarian food these days. It's 10 years ago, 15 years ago, especially around smaller towns in New Zealand, it's extremely unheard of being a vegetarian. People are quite shocked by it. What do you eat and how do you survive? The human body, when you look at it scientifically, it's actually designed for vegetable food. We have the exact same digestion tract and intestines, same long length as any sort of vegetarian animal, whereas you look at any carnivore animal that eats meat, they all have fangs for tearing apart meat. They all have extremely short digestive tracts so they can process meat fast and then eliminate it quickly. And they also have extremely highly acidic digestive juices, whereas we have more alkaline digestive in comparison. Our digestive tract is long, for like those of any herbivore animal, for processing slowly the nutrients, and our teeth are designed for grinding vegetables. Okay, so I've got our olives just there to one side. I'll take a couple of tomatoes also. Remove the core. And we'll dice these. Tomatoes there. Olives can go in with the tomatoes. We're dropping those in at the end. So just going to slice one lemon. Just while that quinoa is finishing off, just scatter it on top and there. We'll take these pieces off. Once they're done, we'll just give it a nice little flavour in there. And the other lemon, we'll take the zest and the juice. Can also go in Since we've got all our Mediterranean flavours going on and our greenness, of course we'll add some herbs in. I'm just going to take one sprig of rosemary because rosemary is quite strong. We'll take some parsley, a little bit of flat, a little bit of curly, got some sage, some oregano, and some thyme as well. Such beautiful flavours you get from these Mediterranean flavours. I was lucky enough to work in the Mediterranean for about 5 years. Got to travel around a lot of Italy, Spain, France, Greece, Turkey. Such beautiful food they have there. Lovely markets with nice fresh ingredients. Not so much in the smaller areas anyway, not so much of the big supermarkets we see here. A lot of people just selling things locally, fresh produce, which is such a fantastic way to be. Okay, just tighten all those herbs into a bunch. And chop those up. We'll pop the herbs into a bowl. And with the herbs, put a couple of tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. So they're just covered. We'll add the lemon juice in there. So this is going to form a little bit of a rustic dressing. The last of those in there. Some cracked pepper. Pinch of sea salt. And we'll just turn that quinoa off the heat now. We'll let it sit for about another 3 minutes or so. Let's give those herbs a little stir. just get cleaned up while we're waiting for that quinoa to sit. Okay, as you can see, the quinoa it's got some air holes on the top. There's no more moisture left in there. Looks nice, ready to go. So we'll start just by removing that lemon I put on there. Just gently removing that. Try and so it doesn't break up at all in there. We're just going to lightly scatter this on top of our greens. We'll just let this sit for a moment, and particularly if you're using kale, always put the kale on top. And that way the quinoa, the heat from it at first will just soften it. And just leave it for a minute or two. Just letting that heat do a little bit of its softening on the kale before we mix everything else in. And you can just start to gently move it around a little. Try not to spray it everywhere, of course. This is the problem when you've got a lot of greens in there. Just gently mix it, and you'll see the steam that the quinoa is holding will just slowly start to soften those greens, but they're still going to remain with some of their crunch, all their goodness. This sort of dish is the sort of one you'd want to serve it almost immediately as you've made it. Good. We'll add our fresh herbs with the extra virgin olive oil and the lemon juice, olives, tomato, and the zest of one lemon. Once again, just gently fold that through. That olive oil gives it a nice shine to it, a nice coating on the leaves. You've got that beautiful flavour of the olives with the lemon coming through, all those fresh herbs. And we can start to place that on our plate. Any serving dish you've got to share with, this is a great meal to share with friends, with some crusty Italian bread or so here we have our warm green quinoa salad. Fresh olives, fresh herbs, fresh tomato. Enjoy.